June 19th, 2020, Munich, Germany. A man named James Fries has been at his desk for 12 hours. He started his new job last night. He was hired to be Wirecard's new compliance officer. He was supposed to start on July 1st. But 2 days ago, something happened that made July 1st feel very far away. So they called him in early. By midnight, Fries had found what he was looking for. By 3 a.m., he understood what it meant. 1.9 billion euros. Supposedly sitting in bank accounts in the Philippines. It didn't exist. Not missing, not transferred, not hidden somewhere in a complex accounting structure. It had never existed. And the company that didn't have it was one of the most celebrated technology firms in Europe. To understand how 1.9 billion euros disappears, you first have to understand why nobody was looking. Wirecard was founded in Munich in 1999, the height of the dot-com boom. A payments processor, humble beginnings. But under CEO Markus Braun, who took over in 2002, it became something else entirely. Braun modeled himself on Steve Jobs, the black turtleneck, the vision, the language of disruption. He told investors Wirecard would end cash, would become the payment infrastructure for the entire digital economy. And for a while, it seemed like he was right. By 2018, Wirecard had expanded across 26 countries. It processed over 140 billion euros in transactions every year. And in September 2018, it achieved what no German tech company had ever achieved. It was included in the DAX, Germany's 30 most important companies, replacing Germany's oldest bank, Commerzbank. A Fintech startup in the DAX, worth more than Deutsche Bank. Europe had its answer to Silicon Valley. Germany had its own Steve Jobs. At its peak, Wirecard was valued at $28 billion. There was just one problem. A journalist in London had been staring at Wirecard's numbers since 2014, and the numbers didn't make sense. What he found, and what happened to him for finding it, is one of the strangest stories in the history of financial journalism, because Wirecard didn't just deny the allegations, they went to war. His name was Dan McCrum, an investigative financial journalist at the Financial Times. In 2014, a source gave him a tip. Wirecard's accounts might not be what they appeared. McCrum started digging. What he found was unusual, but proving it was another matter. He wrote some early stories. Wirecard dismissed them. The stock barely flinched. And then, the company noticed him. Wirecard hired private intelligence firms. These firms ran surveillance on McCrum. They monitored his movements, his sources. They constructed what investigators would later call a sting operation, designed to make it look like McCrum was colluding with short sellers. Market manipulation, a criminal offense. On January 30th, 2019, the day McCrum published his most damaging story yet, a dozen anonymous Twitter bots burst into life simultaneously.
McCrum's a criminal. Danny Boy McCrum is going to jail.
And the next morning, a respected analyst at Commerzbank published a note calling McCrum a serial offender and his journalism fake news. Wirecard's stock had dropped. BaFin, Germany's financial regulator, did not investigate Wirecard. They investigated McCrum. The Munich prosecutor opened a criminal investigation into McCrum and his colleague Stefania Palma. BaFin imposed a 2-month ban on short-selling Wirecard stock, effectively protecting the company from investors who believed the journalism. And then, one of the world's most powerful tech investors read the stories and gave Wirecard a $1 billion investment anyway. Wirecard used that investment announcement to argue, "See, even SoftBank believes us. The journalists must be lying." McCrum kept going. For 6 years total, he worked this story, flew to Singapore, Bahrain, followed the money across 3 continents. Wirecard sued the Financial Times, hired lawyers to threaten the paper with legal action, attempted to listen in on the FT editor's office. Every time McCrum published, Wirecard hit back harder. And every time Wirecard hit back, the German government, the German regulator, the German financial establishment stood behind Wirecard. Because Wirecard was the pride of German tech, and nobody wanted to believe that Germany's answer to Silicon Valley was a lie. But while all of this was happening, while McCrum was being investigated and Wirecard was being celebrated, the man actually running the fraud was living a life that makes the financial crime look almost boring by comparison. Jan Marsalek joined Wirecard in 2000. He had no university degree, no formal financial training, no traceable background that made sense for a man rising to COO of a $28 billion company. He was Austrian, 30 years old when he made COO. He lived in a mansion in Munich that cost 38,000 euros a month to rent. He traveled the world on private jets. He had, according to colleagues, an extraordinary ability to walk into any room in any country and immediately know who mattered and why. Immigration records would later reveal that Marsalek made more than 60 trips to Russia, using 6 different Austrian passports. 60 trips to Russia, 6 passports, for a payments company COO. His Vienna office was located directly next to the Russian embassy. This was not an accident. According to an investigation later published by The Insider, Der Spiegel, and other outlets, Marsalek had been recruited by the GRU, Russia's military intelligence service, around 2014. The same year, McCrum received his first tip about Wirecard. As Wirecard's COO, Marsalek oversaw hundreds of millions of dollars flowing through third-party accounts in Dubai, Singapore, and the Philippines. Investigators later concluded that a significant portion of that money was being used to fund Russian intelligence operations in Libya, in Syria, across the Middle East and Africa. He collected data on Wirecard's clients, including Germany's Federal Criminal Office, the BKA, which used Wirecard's payment systems, and sent that data to Moscow. He had access to a Novichok formula, the nerve agent used to poison Sergei Skripal in Salisbury, England. He shared jokes about it in messages with a spy network he was running in Britain. And through all of this, he sat in a glass office in Munich, dressed in a suit, presenting quarterly results, managing a company that Europe's financial establishment was calling a miracle. Nobody looked twice. And then, on June 18, 2020, everything collapsed. Not slowly, not over months, in a single week. And the speed of what happened next is unlike anything in modern financial history. EY, Ernst & Young, had been auditing Wirecard for years. Every year, they signed off on the accounts. Every year, they confirmed the billions were there. But in June 2020, they asked for one more confirmation. From the banks in the Philippines, where 1.9 billion euros supposedly sat in trust accounts. The banks responded. They had no relationship with Wirecard. The accounts didn't exist. The money had never been there. On June 18th, Markus Braun appeared on a YouTube video. He spoke carefully. He said it could not be ruled out that Wirecard had become the aggrieved party in a case of fraud of considerable proportions. In other words, we might be the victim here. The market didn't believe him. In a single day, Wirecard's stock lost more than 60% of its value. That night, James Frice, the new compliance officer, arrived for his first day. 12 hours later, as we heard at the beginning, he confirmed what the banks had already said. The 1.9 billion euros did not exist. June 19th, Markus Braun resigned as CEO. June 22nd, Wirecard officially confirmed the money was gone. June 22nd, same day, Jan Marsalek was fired. Marsalek was given until the next morning to appear before regulators. He didn't appear. Nobody knew where he was. June 23rd, Markus Braun walked into Munich police headquarters and turned himself in. June 25th, Wirecard filed for insolvency. A $28 billion company, Germany's tech pride, gone in 7 days. The banks that had lent Wirecard money were owed 1.7 billion euros. Bonds worth 1.4 billion euros would never be repaid. And the fraud, the auditors said, had been running for years. EY had signed off on fabricated accounts for years, without catching it. This wasn't just a company that lied. This was a company that the entire system, the auditors, the regulators, the government, had failed to catch. Chancellor Olaf Scholz, who was finance minister at the time, would later call it unparalleled in Germany's post-war history. But the collapse was only the beginning. Because while Braun was walking into a police station, Marsalek was doing something else entirely. Something that made clear this was never just a fraud story. This was a spy story. On the night of June 19th, the same night James Frice was confirming that 1.9 billion euros didn't exist, Jan Marsalek was at a small private airport in Austria. The plane had been booked using a copy of someone else's passport. A Georgian billionaire named David Yakubashvili, who would later say he had no idea his identity was being used. 2 pilots, vetted, trusted, arranged by a contact of Martin Weiss, the former head of operations of Austria's intelligence service. The BVT. False tracks were laid. Philippine immigration officials were bribed to fake records showing Marsalek had entered the Philippines. While investigators looked for him in Asia, Marsalek landed in Minsk, Belarus. On the night of June 20th, the next morning, he crossed from Belarus into Russia by car. The crossing was organized by Lev Dengov, a Belarusian-Russian dual national who served as Putin's special envoy to Libya. He arrived in Moscow, and there he remains. Interpol issued a red notice.
Germany issued an arrest warrant. Russia has not commented. He has been seen by those who know where to look, working with Russian officials. Reports suggest he has been involved in reorganizing Russian operations in conflict zones. He has been given a new identity, a new life, in a country that does not extradite. In 2023, British police arrested a Bulgarian national named Orlan Rusev. They found tens of thousands of messages between Rusev and Marsalek. The messages referenced the GRU. They contained jokes about Novichok. Rusev pleaded guilty to spying for Russia. Police confirmed Marsalek had been acting as a conduit between the spy network and Russian intelligence services. The man who processed your online payments was running a Russian spy network across Europe at the same time, from the same desk. Nobody knew. And the question that remains, the question that the trial in Munich cannot fully answer, is whether the fraud and the espionage were separate, or whether Wirecard was never really a payments company at all. In December 2022, 2.5 years after the collapse,
The trial of Markus Braun began in Munich. 474-page indictment. Commercial gang fraud, market manipulation, breach of trust, accounting fraud. Braun's defense was simple. He was the victim. Marsalek was the mastermind. He, Braun, had been deceived by his own COO. Notably absent from the courtroom, Jan Marsalek. Oliver Bellenhaus, the former head of Wirecard's Dubai subsidiary, pleaded guilty and became a key prosecution witness. He confirmed the fraud had been systematic, deliberate, industrial. And then there was EY. Ernst & Young had audited Wirecard for 9 years. 9 consecutive years. They signed off. They accepted documents showing bank balances of 1.9 billion euros without confirming directly with the banks. A basic step in any audit. Not done. KPMG, hired for a special independent audit in 2020, could not verify the cash existed. EY refused to sign the 2019 annual accounts. That refusal triggered the collapse. A German parliamentary committee later found that the German government had actively lobbied on Wirecard's behalf, in China, in India, promoting the company while the allegations were being investigated. Angela Merkel personally raised Wirecard's business interests on a state visit to China 4 months before the collapse. BaFin, the regulator that had investigated a journalist for exposing the fraud, was itself investigated. Staff members were found to have bought and sold Wirecard shares during the crisis period, trading on information they had from their regulatory role. The watchdog had been watching itself. But here is the question nobody can quite answer. Wirecard processed real payments for real companies. It had real clients, real technology. So what exactly was fake and what was real? Here is what makes Wirecard different from a simple fraud. The company was real. The technology was real. The payment terminals worked. The transactions processed. The clients were genuine companies with genuine needs. The fraud lived in a specific part of the business, a network of third-party acquirers in Asia and the Middle East. Companies that Wirecard claimed were processing payments on its behalf and holding cash in escrow accounts. Those companies reported enormous revenues to Wirecard. Wirecard reported those revenues to investors. EY accepted the reports. But investigators found that many of those third-party companies barely existed. They had small offices, few employees. The revenues they reported were largely fabricated. The 1.9 billion euros in Philippine bank accounts didn't exist because the accounts didn't exist, because the relationships with the banks didn't exist. The question the trial was trying to answer:
Was Braun aware? Did he design it? Or was he, as he claims, running a real company that his COO was secretly using as a vehicle for fraud and espionage? The honest answer, as of today, is we don't fully know. Because the man who knows is in Moscow, and he's not talking. Wirecard's building still stands in Munich. The logo was there long after the company was gone. Dan McCrum and Stefania Palma were cleared of all charges in September 2020, 3 months after Wirecard collapsed. 6 years after McCrum first received a tip. A German bank, the country's regulator, had spent more time investigating a journalist than investigating the company he was writing about. Markus Braun remains in custody. His trial is expected to conclude in late 2025. He faces up to 15 years. He still says Marsalek did it. Jan Marsalek is 44 years old. He has Russian citizenship, multiple fake passports, a new identity, and a country that doesn't extradite protecting him. Every day, hundreds of millions of people tap their phones and cards to pay for things.
They trust the system. They trust the numbers are real. Wirecard taught us something about that trust. It taught us that the most dangerous fraud isn't the one that takes your money in the dark. It's the one that happens in the light, in front of auditors, regulators, governments, and journalists, while everyone looks the other way. The 1.9 billion euros was never found. Jan Marsalek was never caught. And somewhere in Moscow, a man who processed Europe's payments and ran Russia's spies is living a life that a screenwriter would call too unbelievable.